Hey everybody, DM Jim here and welcome to another episode of Game Terrain Engineering. As you can tell, I am not in my workshop. I am actually on vacation with a family and having a good time, swimming a lot at the beach. Weather's been good, so I really haven't had a whole lot of time to check my email and comments, videos and things like that. But last night I got a little antsy. I just wanted to make something. I can't go too long without doing something like that. And I had checked my email last night, and one of my viewers emailed me a request. He sent me a picture, and I'm going to put that up right here. As you can see, these are miniature bases, fantasy miniature bases, and they're great looking. I think they're beautiful, and I don't know who makes them. I'm going to find out. But he asked me what I would do to create something like those. Now, first off, I probably would not even attempt to make those by hand. The detail work is so intricate. So what I did was I went to Tinkercad. I designed something that I think many of you will like. It's my take on these bases. Now, here's the deal. I'm not trying to steal this company's work or thunder. I'm just going to show you my take on doing one of these. It's up to you if you want to do more of them. But, you know, I don't know how expensive they are. I don't know how cheap they are. I am definitely going to find out where I can get them, and I want to buy some of them because I think they're just outstanding looking. But anyway, if you'll keep watching this video, I'm going to show you my steps in Tinkercad that I use to recreate one of these bases. I obviously don't have access to my 3D printer, so I won't be able to print it out and show you the end result. But what I am going to do in the description below is I'm going to make the file available for download. It'll be an STL file, so any of you who have a 3D printer, take the file and go print it and let me know if it turns out. I will say that if I was going to print it at home, I would probably print it on the very high, 0.1 millimeter high resolution that my Prusa can handle. It's just, like I said, it's very intricate. There's a lot of detail work there, and if I think it's going to require, a fine level of detail for printing. So I'm curious to see how it works or how it looks. I'll be printing it when I get home in the next few days. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. I will be back in the workshop in just a few days and working on some more new projects. I've got some more science fiction terrain coming. I've got some more Star Wars terrain, Star Wars Legion terrain coming. And I'll be starting up DMing again in September. And when that rolls around, or prior to that rolling around, I'll be doing some more fantasy terrain based on the new adventure that's going to be released, I think at the end of August. I may be wrong. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video, and I'm off to the beach. See you later. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start with my basic miniature base, and I'll put a link up above to the video where I showed you how I originally made this. I'm going to enlarge it just because it makes it easier to add detail work later. They're almost 100 millimeters in diameter, and I've made a copy on the left and a copy on the right. And the reason I'm doing this is I'm actually going to chop these in half horizontally. So each one of them is 16 millimeters tall. So I'm going to grab this box over here, and I'm going to make a whole object to delete the bottom 8 millimeters from the cylinder on the left. And I'm going to copy this box, and I'm going to make a copy and move it over to the right, and I'm going to raise it up 8 millimeters so that it chops off the top half of the cylinder on the right. And once I've got those grouped, you see here I'm grouping the left whole object and the left cylinder, and then I'm grouping the right whole object and the right cylinder. It leaves behind the two halves here, and then I just lowered this half down to the work plane. Next, what I did was take the bottom part, move it to the right because I'm not going to be editing it, and I'm going to only be modifying the top half of the base. So I start with a large cylinder, and I want this cylinder to be just a little bit larger than the top part that I'm going to be replacing. And as you can see here, I'm just trying to resize it, get it just a little bit bigger. This is going to form a moon cutout that's going to rest on top of the bottom half. So what I do is once I've got the size the way I want, I'm going to put a cylinder in the center here, and I'm going to basically just make a donut or a ring. And as you can see, I'm just trying to size it. By using the align button here, I can make sure that they are perfectly centered before I group them, and then this creates the donut shape. Next, what I want to do is create a bunch of wedges going around this ring. And there's a lot of different ways to do this, but the way I prefer is to take a box, stretch it out really far, make it thin, like 2 millimeters. And then I just make a bunch of copies of this, and I'm going to set them at like maybe the 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. I use the rotate button to move them around, as you'll see in just a second. Like I'll make a copy here, and then I'm just going to rotate it 90 degrees. And then what I do is I center these two objects using the center tool or line tool, and I'll group them to make them a solid object. And then I'll make a bunch of copies of this, and I'll probably I think I make 4, yeah, 3 or 4. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rotate each one, I think like 22 degrees or something like that. Let's see, yeah, 22. And then I center it with the original one using the align tool again. And then I'm going to do the next one, and I'm going to make it 44 degrees, or 45 degrees actually. And this one right here, I'll rotate it to 45. Right there. And the next one will be rotated to, I believe, 67. And again, as I'm doing this, I am centering all the objects along the center point so that I'm creating this spirally looking thing here. I didn't rotate it enough. There we go. So after I center this last one and I group these items together, now what I can do is center it with the ring. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to make it all a whole object. I want it to cut into a solid object. So I move the ring over, and now what I'm going to do is raise it up just a little bit. Not the ring, I meant to raise up the fins. I'm going to raise it up till they make an indentation in the solid part. Then I am going to group them and align them. Here's the alignment going on, so they're all centered. And then I grab them again and I choose group, and that cuts out these little indentations there. Now my next step is to cut away most of this ring. I want to leave just a section of it that's going to be raised above the bottom half of the miniature base. So this is a little complicated, not really, but it's a little complicated to explain. What I do is I place it where I like it. That looks good. Okay, so I'm happy with how that ring is going to go over. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a large cube, and I'm going to copy the top half of my base right here. I copy it, and I turn that into a whole object, and then I center it underneath the square, the cube. So I use the align tool, and I'm going to center it dead center, and I'm going to look underneath it to show you that it's there. Okay, right there, you can kind of see it. Then I turn this entire cube into another whole object. I'm going to center it on the original top half of my base, like this. I'm going to click the align, and then use the center points to align it. Then I'm going to take the spiral ring, and I'm going to stick it in there, and I'm going to put it where I want it. That looks good. Now what I need to do is remove the actual solid miniature base top half. I don't want it anymore. So I'm going to look underneath, and I'm going to take it out of the equation by moving it there. And now I'm going to group the whole cube and the solid ring by clicking the group button. And it leaves this little fragment. Now this bottom fragment, I can just use another whole object and overlap it with that, group it all together, and boom, it's gone, as you can see here. Now I delete the top half of my miniature base, and I place this ring over the bottom half, and I raise it up about 7 millimeters. And now I zoom in a little bit just so I can make sure that it is where I want it. I'm just doing this by eye. There, that looks pretty good right there. That is where the ring is going to be. Now my next step is I want to add some ornamental pieces. So I've gone out to images.google.com and I typed in circular stone floor or something like that. I'm going to take a screenshot of this piece right here. And then I'm going into the preview tool and I'm going to delete out the colored sections. I just sort of grab them, and when I select them I hit the delete key. Some of them will do multiples. I'm going to do every bit of this. As you can see, I just jumped ahead a little bit here, but I'm basically leaving the grout or the grout lines behind. Then I'm going to go into online-convert.com and I'm going to convert that image into an SVG file because that's what it takes to import into Tinkercad. I import the file, I choose it, I go down to monochrome, and then I click the convert file and it will download to my computer. I'm also going to do this same process to something I downloaded called Rune, and you're going to see that right here. I converted that image as well. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to import both of those SVG files. So right now I'm going to import the Rune. So here it is, Rune1 SVG. I click Open and Import. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit because these things tend to be imported rather large. There it is. I click on it. I click Whole to make it a whole object. And I'm going to shrink it down. And what I want to do is I'm going to overlap that whole object with the solid part of the miniature base and then group them so that it creates this sort of carved in image of that rune. Now to do that, I overlap the whole object with the base and then I raise it up until it just cuts into the solid part, as you can see here. And then I'm going to scoot it forward and resize it a little more. And this is just an eyeball thing. You can make it, whatever looks good to you, but this, I keep shrinking it a little bit more. And when I'm happy with its placement, I will increase the thickness of it by raising its height right here. I select the whole object and I make it a little taller, and then I can slide it up and down to cut into the solid piece. Once I'm happy, I group the two together, and as you can see here, it takes the rune and cuts into the solid part, leaving behind this really cool image. Now the next thing I want to do is import that stone, what I call stone black and white SVG. I'm going to import that in, and again, it's going to be a little larger than the base, so I'm going to have to shrink it down. And these are the grout lines. So I'm just going to shrink this down, and what I'm going to do is turn this object into a whole object, and I'm going to merge it with the solid base, and wherever the two merge together, it's going to cut out in the shape of these grout lines. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise this up just a little bit, and I am going to resize it. And this is sort of an experimental thing. You'll play around with this. At first I wasn't happy because the center of the grout line was right in the middle of the miniature base, and it just didn't look good. I didn't like the way it was centered. So in just a second you'll see how I play around by stretching it and making it a little larger and basically getting that center circle more to the left of the miniature base. Okay, right there, I'm pretty happy with that. So all I'll do now is grab the base and this grout line object and group them, and it will cut that stone pattern into the solid base, as you can see here. Now the only thing left is these crescent pieces, or this ring with these little wedges. They're kind of bland, kind of plain, as you can see right here. So what I want to do is I want to add some runes. So I'm going to use this scribble tool, which is it's a new feature of Tinkercad. Basically, you just use the pencil and you draw something on the screen here, and it'll turn it into a three-dimensional object. I'm just making this up. I just draw something that kind of looks like a rune, add some hands, fingers, whatever. And when you click the Done button, it turns it, there it is. It's a three-dimensional object. Now what you can do is you can turn this into a whole object and then merge it with the base or those little wedges, and it'll cut out the rune from the solid part. And I'm going to do that 5 or 6 times here. I'm going to create one rune for each of the wedges, and hopefully that will add just the right amount of detail to make this thing look finished. Now as you can see here, what I'm doing is I'm placing the rune, turning it into a whole object, and then I'm going to resize it down so it fits in the wedge. Try to center it by eye. And then I use the up-down, raise-lower tool to decide how deep of a cut into the plastic or the solid object I want to go. Then I group it, and boom, it turns it into a rune that is cut in. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward here, and you can watch as I do the remaining runes. Now that the runes are done, all I need to do is resize this base down to a reasonable or realistic size for a miniature base. So what I'm going to do is, it's normally 40 millimeters, so I'm just going to type in 40 millimeters, and there you go. I now have a rune or fantasy miniature base with runes all over it, some ancient stone, grout lines, and it's at the 40 millimeter size. I can shrink this to 30 millimeters, I can make it 50 millimeters, whatever your needs are, that's what you can do. I'm going to make this file available below for download, so you can use it as you wish.